My name is Andy Pace. I'm one of the board members of the Co-Intelligence Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this special event celebrating the launch of Tom Atlee's latest book, Co-Intelligence, the Applied Wisdom of Wholeness, Interconnectedness, and Co-Creativity. I'm assuming most of you are familiar with Tom and his pioneering efforts, but for those of you who aren't, I'm going to give you a brief introduction. Tom is a visionary thinker, author, activist, and the founder of the Co-Intelligence Institute. His work revolves around the profound concept of co-intelligence, a term that was conceived of by Tom to embrace much more than collective intelligence alone. And it arose out of Tom's response to an inquiry into what would intelligence look like if we were to take wholeness, interconnectedness, and co-creativity seriously. This is an inquiry that's lived at the heart of Tom's work for over 30 years, exploring how co-intelligence and collective wisdom can be harnessed to address the complex challenges facing our world today. His insights have inspired countless individuals, communities, and organizations to rethink traditional approaches to problem solving, governance, and social change. Tom's work transcends conventional boundaries, encompassing fields such as systems thinking, dialogue and deliberation, facilitation, and participatory democracy. His holistic approach emphasizes the importance of collaboration, diversity, and creativity in fostering co-intelligence solutions to the world's most pressing problems. So today, as we gather to celebrate the launch of Tom's latest book, we have an opportunity to delve deeper into the principles and practices of intelligence.
Why?
And if people could mute, if there's anybody maybe who hasn't got themselves on mute at the moment, if you could press that, thank you so much. We are going to be exploring co-intelligence today, co-intelligence through a program that we've got on for the next 90 minutes, and I'm going to post that in the chat. So, sorry, let's get this up. There we go. So we're going to start off with Tom's presentation of the book. He'll talk a little bit about the story of how it came to be, what's in it, and maybe he'll be reading some excerpts and some poems from it. Then we're going to go into a Q&A session. And then for the final part of the call, we're going to be looking at what's next. How do we actually build on this book? What can we actually do? What can we bring into the world that is based on these principles of co-intelligence that might make a positive change? And we're going to be doing that using an interactive tool, an online tool called Polis. If you haven't seen it and you don't know what it's all about, don't worry, we'll explain that later on. And then we'll come to a closing. Tom may read a very brief poem at the end. And then we'll finish off with what we call the after party. So we finish after 90 minutes. So in Pacific time, that will be 11:30. Here in the UK, that's going to be 6:30 p.m. But you are very welcome to stay on. You know, we have an optional hangout space afterwards where we can just hang out and chat and share whatever is coming up.
Come on.
So just muting people who are maybe got noise going on in the background. Okay, so let's see. I think then without further ado, I invite you to join me in welcoming Tom and expressing our gratitude for his remarkable contributions to the world by highlighting possibilities for collective wisdom and co-creative action. Thank you, Tom, and over to you.
Okay, I'm turning all the attention of admin here and tech over to you again, Andy. So I'm gonna, because I'm trying to keep within our little schedule, I'm gonna time myself for, I have 25 minutes. So I'm gonna, you'll see, maybe hear an alarm going off in 10 minutes and then another in 10 minutes. But I want to give a little bit about me as it shaped the co-intelligence work being born into an progressive, intellectual, walls covered with books, family, activist, socialist father, economist, and got into peace activism at a very early age. And that sort of set up for the watershed event of my life, which was the Great Peace March in 1986, which was 400 people walking across the country with nobody in charge. It started out very top down, and then the organization that started it fell apart. And, 800 people left and 400 people stayed, and we ended up arriving in Washington, D.C. with 1,200 people again. How that happened was a life-changing experience. I'd never seen anything remotely like it before. So after that, I turned my life over to researching what things like that might I be able to learn, largely to support progressive activism at that stage. And most of the co-intelligence basics were developed by the mid-1990s, but by then I'd interacted with a whole pile of corporate consultants who were doing the most creative work in that. Corporations used to be the enemy for me, so it was a very strange shift to find a different set of colleagues primarily. Founded the Co-Intelligence Institute in 1996. And in 98, one of the people who's on this call, who was on the original board of the Co-Intelligence Institute from 96, asked me if I knew about the systemic effects of Y2K. And I said, I don't have to worry, I got a Mac. But she got me to look at the systemic dynamics, and I went, whoa, this could be a big deal, and shifted everything over into thinking about how co-intelligence insights would apply to a collapsing kind of scene where big parts of infrastructure were going down. How could communities be resilient and all that? And then Y2K did not have nearly the impact that we thought it was going to be, and I shifted into wise democracy work, which resulted in the Tao of Democracy coming out in 2003, Tao of Democracy. And then in 2005 to 2009, I got in from a colleague I had in the Y2K stuff, got into evolutionary activism. And that resulted in my book, Reflections on Evolutionary Activism, in 2009. And that did not grab people the same way the democracy stuff did. And so I reluctantly let it go and went back to the democracy stuff. And during the evolutionary activism period, a friend of mine and I had done 5 conferences, and including one on philanthropy, to have transformationally oriented philanthropists come together and think about how to transform philanthropy. But by 2010, I got back into the wise democracy work. And in 2012, Empowering Public Wisdom was published. And for the only book that I ever got published by an actual publisher. And then in 2017, the next big development was the Wise Democracy Pattern Language, which is a whole pile of design guidances. If you wanted to make a wise democracy, here are things you'd pay attention to. It has lots of other applications too, but it's 96 different patterns. Also in 2017, I published the participatory sustainability, which is applying the sense that you need to have the whole system participating and generating sustainability if you want to have sustainability, be able to shift over into sustainability. And the wise democracy work was largely what I was doing from 2017 on. And so we end up in 2023, and I started to see these new analyses of our challenges that were framed in terms of the meta crisis. Some people said polycrisis, all the crises we have coming together. And I'd originally done the co-intelligence work, thinking what was needed to actually address the major crises such as nuclear war, which was my original focus. And I learned about Daniel Schmachtenberger, watched and read a bunch of his stuff, and saw AI thanks to him, saw AI as as an accelerator, potential accelerator of all the dynamics that were driving the collapse. That brings us to late November last year when someone I don't know, a guy named Nels Olson, alerted me to the fact that a business professor named Ethan Mollick was publishing a book in April about living and working with AI, and he'd given it the title Co-Intelligence. This stirred up a lot of reaction in me and circles around me, as you can imagine. I wrote to Professor Mollick alerting him to my work and offering to talk about possible collaborations. He replied very politely, saying he saw no connection between his work and mine. So after much discussion with my colleagues and writing a blog post about the situation, I decided to write a book about the kind of co-intelligence I'd been exploring for 30 years, which I actually had been trying with some colleagues back in the 90s. Several years we spent trying to get a book out about co-intelligence, and people kept wanting different things in the book, and I kept changing it, and it never ended up getting done, and then was set aside by the Y2K work and then the Wise Democracy work. But in mid-December, I finally decided, okay, we're going to do a book, and recruited a small team of supporters, and together we got out this 380-page book on co-intelligence by mid-March, a few weeks before Mollick's book will be officially released. And now we have it so that when you search for co-intelligence, Mollick's book comes up first and ours comes up right behind it on Amazon. So that was a success. So thanks to both Nels Olson and Ethan Mollick and my team, which featured Martin Rausch, who was my main companion creating the Wise Democracy pattern language. Martin was doing the liaising with Amazon's print-on-demand system to be able to get our book published through that and get up on Amazon. And so we now have a book explicitly about co-intelligence. I'd written several books on democracy, as you can see, and a book on evolutionary activism, but I'd never done the book on co-intelligence, which is the underlying philosophy and logic underneath all my other work. So this is a big accomplishment for me. I remember when after I did the Wise Democracy pattern language, I had a heart attack actually in the same year. And as they were wheeling me into the emergency room, I thought, thank God I got the Wise Democracy pattern language done. And so it was a legacy kind of thing. And there's a similar feeling with this book, that a lot of the material that was woven into this book, it's 70–80% has been written in one form or another before. There's only 20–25% that's really significantly new, but it had never been pulled together. It's scattered all over the place, and the basic underlying logic of the book and of the co-intelligence work has not been well represented before. So this is, for me, a great accomplishment, and I can leave now. No. So to look at the overall themes, the first part of the book goes over the basic theory and covers the scope of the title, intelligence, wholeness, interconnectedness, co-creativity, and wisdom. I mean, the whole thing is to get the wisdom we need to address the challenges that we're facing. That's the motivation underlying it. But I took those words, as I did my research, I took those words and reframed them somewhat. So we have, in the co-intelligence worldview, reframing intelligence as how do we achieve evolving understanding as we navigate our evolving world. Intelligence is largely about pattern recognition, learning, things like that. And rather than thinking in terms of tests or success in modern life or whatever, intelligence is about seeing what's going on, understanding what it is. I gotta stop and restart my thing. Sort of getting models and stories and whatever about what is that actually work, and engaging with reality in a way that in the feedback loop that we call learning, that as reality changes, we can track it and be congruent with its dynamics and its context and circumstances. So I'm framing intelligence in that way. And then the question of how do you take the whole into account as you are practicing using your intelligence? And that's where wholeness comes in. For many people, wholeness is just unity. I mean, a lot of the spiritual people particularly think that wholeness is unity. And it is, but I've had a project of bringing, whenever anybody is talking about wholeness, I look at what it is they mean by that. And for the last, 30 years, I've been weaving a more and more comprehensive sense of what wholeness is and doing various models about it, some of which are in the book, others on my blog, etc. But I would say, especially if I had to summarize it quickly, it would be inclusive, evolving complexity. So we live in a complex world that's constantly evolving. It is all interconnected. It's all unfolding, and we're unfolding with it in relationship to it. And that's wholeness. And it includes, non-dual reality. It includes systems thinking. It includes biology. All these things are happening at once, and trying to take that seriously when we're using our intelligence is fundamentally what this exercise is all about, co-intelligence. And as a subset of wholeness, interconnectedness, everything is interconnected with everything else. And that is systems thinking. I think of any form of systems, any form of any way of thinking about and dealing with interconnectedness is what I think systems thinking is about. And that can use cybernetics, it can use ecology, it can use shamanism, anything that is actually dealing with interconnectedness, I think is legitimate systems thinking. And much can be gotten by integrating more of those different ways of thinking about interconnectedness. And that interconnectedness isn't static, it's interactive. There's things going on between all the parts and between the parts and the whole, etc., all the time. And that's where co-creativity comes in. That's the nature of the interactivity. We're all co-creating everything. And it's interesting when you try and take these things seriously. Wholeness, interconnectedness, and co-creativity. There's implications to that most people don't think about particularly, and that I've been thinking about and putting, and you'll see lots more about that in this book. And there's a way, when I looked at wisdom, I actually did it's at the Institute of Noetic Sciences that I was part of, which is a mixture of psychospiritual, psychic kinds of stuff with science, and talking with opinion leaders in that world. I did a survey of them of what they thought wisdom was, and it was all over the map. Very interesting. It's all that survey, and the results are up on my website, the cointelligence.org website. And when I started to think about my reasons for doing this co-intelligence work in the first place, and it leans towards collectives rather than individuals. It includes individuals, but has a very definite collective, bias to it. And particularly in the wise democracy world, it's like, what is collective wisdom? What is it I'm trying to do with that? And I sort of think of seeking and learning what's needed for long-term broad benefit. I used to define wisdom as taking into account what needs to be taken into account for long-term broad benefit. The long-term broad benefit is key. What we're actually doing towards that, there's a lot of debatable on how to do that. But that's what we're going for, is having that wisdom to our intelligence expands into that level of wisdom for that purpose. More and more that we can include, the more wise we become in our application of intelligence. And that is co-intelligence. Intelligence that arises from, uses, and serves healthy manifestations of wholeness, interconnectedness, and co-creativity. So that's the realm that this field is about, that I've labeled co-intelligence, and why I'm sad that there's a chance that living and working with AI will be what that word means, because living and working with AI is a subset of this much larger thing. And I'm hoping that enough people who go to look for the book by Ethan Mollick will also see this book, and some of them will go into it and explore it for, more fully. So there's another, oh my, I have to wrap up really quickly so I can do my reading. There is a leading edge right for me right now, because people want to have a community of practice with co-intelligence, and I'm constantly saying, but there's so many practices that reflect this or that piece of co-intelligence. But I have come up with a thing. I guess what I'll do is post it in the blog, so you can, not the blog, the would copy. Hello, copy for me.
Do you want me to do that, Tom?
Yeah, there is a practice, an outline, a pattern of practice that can be called the practice of co-intelligence. And that's what Andy is going to post in the chat. And we can talk more about it, what it all means. There's more, and it's relatively new. It's just within the last week or two, finally getting around to being able to talk in terms of a co-intelligence practice, and imagining a community of practice of people who are doing this kind of thing in many different fields and many different methods, and talking about how those reflect this pattern, this meta pattern. So now, in my last 8 minutes, I am going to read to you from, I don't have an actual copy of the book yet. This is a draft, a proof, what's called a proof copy. And it's pretty much what the regular one is, except the regular one has all the great endorsements people gave for us, and the index, which was a big deal for me. So I will read to you from an excerpt. Each one of these chapters in the beginning has a poem between it and its next one. And each one of the next chapters in the sort of examples and applications section has a story between it. So this is a section of the poem called The Tao of Co-Intelligence. Starts on 85, if you've got the book, page 85. And in the end, the message is so simple. We are all, and that's a capital A, all, in this together. And simplicity unfolds into something intricate. We are all. We are the world showing up as a body. We are universal consciousness showing up as our mind. We are everything showing up as one thing. We are the essence of humanity showing up as diverse people. We are interconnectedness itself showing up as separate selves. We are every generation showing up as one generation. We are aliveness showing up as alive. In this dancing day, this story reality, this intricate universal conversation, this woven fabric together, making it, not making it. We all live downstream. We are all connected. The fingers of the weaver dancing on the loom. All my relations, hey, we are that. We are all in this together. And then there's a story that I like, because right now I have a lot of medical issues. I'm almost 77, and the sense of our healthcare in the US, our healthcare system is just profoundly broken. And I ran across this amazing this amazing story of how to do it differently. It's called Healthcare Professionals Get Liberated from Admin and Management to More Effectively Care. Home health care exists because people who are sick, injured, disabled, or elderly often need help and prefer to be at home. Nurses and other healthcare professionals enter those jobs because they want to help people. It seems like a match made in heaven, but it usually isn't. What's in the way? Bureaucracy, paperwork, management, distance, overwork. So what happens when you take away hierarchical management and bureaucracy and help small, self-directed teams of nurses and home care staff come together and serve people in need in particular neighborhood where they can spend time getting to know all those people they're helping? Well, client satisfaction soars, employee satisfaction and effectiveness skyrocket, overhead costs plummet. Your network of small, self-directed care teams outperforms more centralized care companies without even trying. You go from a team of 5 nurses to over 1,000 teams of no more than a dozen people each, a total of 14,000 decentralized employees in just over a decade. The neighborhood focus, about 10,000 people with about 40 patients, allows the nurses to become health coaches as well as direct healthcare providers. They promote prevention and self-sufficiency by helping patients tap into existing support systems, including family, friends, and volunteers. Suddenly, these healthcare folks become community builders as well. This gigantic, successful experiment we're talking about uses a headquarters staff of about 50 people who handle all the paperwork involved with the network's finances, payroll, regulatory requirements, and so on, freeing the caregivers from all that frustrating administration. 18 coaches support the care teams with any problems they cannot solve themselves. Everyone else is a nurse or team caregiver working in an intimate work environment. Because they are self-managed, these small teams develop and evolve how they operate, even hiring and firing their own staff. They thrive on their shared purpose and their meaningful, masterful engagement with their work and their clients. When any one of them face new challenges, in-network technology enables them to easily tap into their thousands of colleagues for expertise and resources. They are supported to functionally and successfully care without the distraction of endless paperwork. This is Buurtzorg, the largest and most unusual home healthcare community in our company in Netherlands. They are one of the most famous examples of companies that have completely eliminated their layers of management. Buurtzorg's founder, Jos de Blok, runs, quote unquote, the network largely by shielding it from bureaucratic impulses and approaches, such as strategic and motivational programs. He's found that many new teams that apply to help a particular neighborhood do best when they're simply left to find their own way. So he does that. He does what he can to support that. All this might not make sense from the usual corporate worldview, but it has proven to work and is now spreading to other countries. After each story, there's a little commentary, and the commentary here is we're not surprised by Buurtzorg's success. Supporting self-organization by connecting the life energy and intelligence of people taking responsibility for what they love is a fundamental organizing principle of co-intelligence. Another way of looking at it is that the removal of layers of management chronicled in the book Reinventing Organizations, which introduced us to Buurtzorg, is an example of shifting power dynamics from power over to power with, power from among, and power from within, and the resulting felt agency and full efficiency that comes from engaging the whole rather than stripping away all perceived redundancy and forcing measurable productivity. That's a coined word, whole efficiency of mine. I love playing with that. Similarly, the inclusion of family, friends, and the client himself or herself in the larger care team that includes medical and government resources exemplifies the co-intelligence principle of engaging the whole system. The creation of an administrative service center exemplifies the wise democratic principle of having expertise on tap, not on top. It also relates to the co-intelligence principle of big caring, because it frees nurses and caregivers from deadening administrative tasks so that they can spend quality healing time with the people they serve. as well as recruiting community caregivers mentioned above, and embedding the capacity for caring into the system itself. That's Bertsorg. Finally, I'm going to read a chapter, one of the shortest chapters in the book. It's the epilogue. Prospects, adapting meaningfully with the edge of life. Today's challenges are as global as they are personal, and vice versa, thanks to the intrinsic and technologically enhanced connectivity of everything. They are immensely complex, reaching into every corner of life and impacting the whole of life. They are evolving and accelerating. There is a way in which we are moving beyond problem solving, the linear sense that if there's something we don't like, we can fix it individually or collectively, and it won't be there anymore. The nature of the challenges we face will only become less toxic as we change ourselves, our stories, our behaviors, and our cultures and systems. We need holistic ways to navigate the complexities taking place, the complexities and changes taking place in the real world, and even within ourselves. Some of these require our innovation, while others require our adaptation. But every approach is fraught with uncertainty about what will happen next, the context in which we will live, work, and act, and the impacts we will have. We need radical new ways of learning, engaging, and relating to each other and to the larger human and more than human worlds. The fundamental principle of co-intelligence that we can relate to our world in ways that emerge from and serve wholeness, interconnectedness, and co-creativity provides fundamental guidance for navigating our lifelong engagement. Life is on an existential edge, and we, of course, are there with it. What we do matters enormously in what happens next. The ideas, questions, and resources in and around this book await our mindful application to our lives and to the ongoing life of the world. That's the end of my little presentation.
Tom, I very much enjoyed your presentation, and I wasn't expecting you to focus on healthcare. That's what I worked in. I worked in all my life. So I know the inside scoop of the system. And I also know about the example you shared about the community-based nursing care in the Netherlands. And it's such a far cry from what's happened in the US in terms of corporatization of healthcare. And even nonprofits are run like corporations. And primary care is entrapped in an archaic system that still runs a treadmill. And it's the cognitive strain and burden on healthcare professionals is overwhelming. It's one of the common causes of burnout, just using your electronic medical record system, which in fact, it doesn't make your job easier. It makes it much more difficult. You couldn't design a worse system. So I'm not very optimistic about it. So my question is, given you give an example of healthcare, and that's, it's a wicked problem. I would say wicked problems of wicked problems. How can we use co-intelligence to be able to evolve from this regressive state of dysfunctional healthcare? It's a big question.
Yes. Easy. I got answers for that. No problem. Yeah. Well, so much of it is for me, from my perspective, is a paradigm shift. And part of that, and Daniel Schmackenberg speaks to this in ways, and lots of other people do, that the fundamental paradigm shift is away from separateness. Our separateness from each other is very fundamental, but our separateness from the problems is also fundamental. The problem separateness from other problems is fundamental. So it's that sense of having everything separated out it makes it, it's like the idea of problem and solution. When you're dealing with complex systems, everything's tangled up with everything else, feeding into everything else. And the sense that our approach to what we don't like is to solve the problem. And at very small scales, that works. But at larger scales, because you're dealing with whole systems, when you do something over in this corner, it generates things over in that corner. And and this is part of the wicked problems you're talking about is you can't solve a problem without generating more problems. No, that's part of the wicked problem dynamic. But it's to call it a wicked problem is still staying stuck in the old frame of problem solving. There's something wrong with this problem because we can't get it to go away. And the fact that we are co-creating is the co-creation interconnected. We are co-creating everything that's going on. And what does that mean for how we intervene in the things that we would like to shift? And it isn't, how would co-intelligence handle it? Co-intelligence wouldn't handle it. Co-intelligence would invite us into a different way of looking at life that we are deeply participating in, and so are others. And who else should be part of dealing with it? And how else? What other things should we include in that? There's lots of things I can talk about, just to give a taste. Gregory Bateson's daughter, one of his many daughters, many kids, Nora Bateson, has created a thing called Warm Data Labs, which is training people to look at any situation from many different angles and realize that if you look at it from any one of those angles, you're not going to be able to successfully address. And she calls it the transcontextuality, being able to live in many contexts and many different perspectives at once. So that's an example of looking at it from a whole and engaging who else we should be asking, who else should be part of the problem or part of the conversation, the solution, who else is in the whole system. Those are all different pieces to put into your answer, but it goes on forever. Like you say, it's a big question you just raised.
Can I just quickly respond by saying that, you can define the meta crisis in different ways, but I'll simply define it as the systemic power abuse dynamics. And in order to operate at the meta level, the meta crisis, we need to have better meta thinking. So my question is, how can we co-create co-intelligence to develop the meta thinking to resolve our meta crisis? And that's all. I'll let other people speak.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
If anybody else has a question, you can raise your hand. Or it doesn't have to be a question. You could have some comment you'd like to make. That's fine too. George.
Yeah, I have a quick reflection on Rick's question about meta-thinking. How can we create meta-thinking? I've been pondering something like that and came to the temporary conclusion, because all my conclusions are temporary. So what I'm thinking now is that meta-thinking would probably require meta-being, because thinking is not separable from existence for embodied humans in plural, which is humanity. So it would take a co-intelligent humanity to develop the level of meta-thinking that we need for addressing the meta-crisis. In other words, I don't think that any individual, even the wisest of us, cannot really have an effective meta-thinking that would able to successfully address the wicked problems. That's it. Sorry.
And there's also a bringing into our efforts to deal with what is unsatisfactory in life, what are generally referred to as the more than human life, and more than human life can obviously, and it's usually referring to nature, natural forces, nature's intelligence. And there's also on the horizon is AI, which is more than human intelligence. It's an alien kind of intelligence, and how to integrate like ordinary human intelligence with nature's intelligence, with AI's intelligence. Now, those are inquiries looking at how to move into a bigger space as we're thinking about things, as we're trying to deal with things. Check. Bob.
You don't look nearly as bad as I thought you might.
Neither do you.
You're holding 77 very well, which, of course, in Japanese culture is a time for joy and fruition. But, you know, most of my work is with people in communities that have been affected by disasters or other crises. And the good news is that's just about everybody at this point in time. And one of the things that I find is that the level of trauma that is present in every system at every level is almost overwhelming. And that trauma itself becomes a huge obstacle in terms of co-intelligence. On the lack of trust, the unwillingness to be vulnerable yet one more time, the experience of people who are without power being lorded over by people with power, and the people who have power actually most of the time not knowing what the hell to do with it, creates this I don't know, maybe the technical term is massive clusterfuck in terms of how we access the co-intelligence, the collective intelligence, the collective wisdom that we've got. And in some ways, it feels like that's part of the what feels like a growing divide between some of these really hopeful meta-analyses and how does that show up in our daily lives? You know, like right now, we're working on a major initiative with the Missouri Foundation for Health that, you know, two of its core principles are engaging equity as a process, are three, engaging equity as a process, centering community expertise, and noticing and shifting power. All of those are deeply co-intelligence moves. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to get to a level where we're actually able to rouse that co-intelligence. So I sit here with deep appreciation for your work of many, many years. And I'm also in the question of, it's like time to make this real. How do we do that?
I salute your question.
That's going to be an almost perfect segue to the next thing that we're going to do after this. But anyway, David has hand raised.
Hi, everyone. Bob's question segues well with a thought that came to me when I was listening to Tom answer. I think he was answering Rick, and the idea, Tom presented the idea of, the necessity of, the requirement to approach the situations that we're looking at and talking about from a collective perspective. My observation is that in my experience is that when I'm engaging people, especially in the United States, they probably everywhere really, 'cause it's a global culture at this point. For sure, even when they're aware of this idea of the dichotomy of a collective versus individualistic perspective, they tend to default to individualistic strategies to navigate the reality that they live in. I'm reminded of a chapter in Charles Eisenstein's book, The Ascent of Humanity, where he talks about there was an anthropologist, or I'm not sure exactly what the career of the person was, but they were interviewing a person in the Pirawa tribe, probably not pronouncing that correctly, and they were trying to demonstrate possible uh, fundamentally different neurological wiring when they asked the question of one of the tribes people said, where do you store your excess meat, your extra meat after you go on a hunt? And they say, I store it in the belly of my brother. And so maybe Tom is familiar with that. So I think it's for myself, another thing I'm reminded of is pretty sure the Dalai Lama was the one that said, you know, you need to learn how to be compassionate with yourself. If you can't be compassionate with yourself, you cannot be compassionate with anyone else. So this thing that I think is also connected to what Bob was just inquiring about. How do you deal with trauma? We're in an unbelievable situation where we're all traumatized to some degree. Somehow, the only answer that I have to that is I have to continue to improve myself, and part of that is really endeavoring to attempt the impossible task of rewiring my cultural training. So I actually have a capacity to even marginally understand the world in a reflexive way from a collective perspective, what I call, I tend to refer to it as a we perspective. Experiment all the time with my son on this. Like we're constantly endeavoring to navigate, what I think it was Dominic Barger from Restorative Circles who talked about conflict being endemic in our experience, which another lens to view that through is one of, we all have maps of the territory, which are always wrong, right? I have a map of each other in our collective groups. They're immediately outdated because they're not static. So conflict is just that our maps need to be updated. And so if we go into it joyfully, Dominic says sometimes, enrich your relationships with conflict. So the orientation then is to say, oh, something is different. I need to update my map. How do you do that though when your cultural training is individualistic, right? All the tools. My argument for why intentional communities in the United States tend to fail is because people don't realize they need a fundamentally different set of tools. And when things get challenging, they fall back on individualistic strategies, and then the endeavor fails. I think this is what I'm trying. I don't have a great presentation on this, but stuff I think about all the time and experiment with all the time. And I agree with Bob, in terms of like, how do we actually how do we really move the needle? This is obviously critical, just talking about stuff. Anyway, I'm going to stop blabbing my mouth right now, but yeah, I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts, any kind of inspiring, ideas that bubble up. So I'm going to mute myself now, and thanks for listening.
Thanks a lot for that. I want to note that there's a shift that I often want to promote. There's so much can be gained by our self-improvement. And the shift I want to promote is from self and who we are and our limitations to the idea of creating contexts and recognizing that contexts are powerful forces. They are not background. They're not furniture. And that I learned a lot from the dialogue and deliberation community. There are certain ways to provide context for conversations where the quality of people's thinking and feeling goes way up beyond either their own or the organizers and designers things, but trying to isolate what interventions at the levels of context can we do that will heighten the co-intelligence of us and the people or entities that we are engaging in the conversations. And it doesn't remove the need and value of individual work on oneself, but it does change the significance of that. I want to offer that as one response to your inquiry, and that's not easy to do. I live in a living housing community, a housing co-op, where we're struggling with some of those differences and how to do it. But the principle is there to me as a guiding one for my work. Check.
Marianne, I saw you unmute. Did you want to say something or ask a question?
Well, man, I can't believe your perception. I was debating. Okay, so I was thinking, I like what Tom said, and I was also thinking about, I've been researching how people are, what's the word? Deciding how to make artificial intelligence more responsible or safe, whatever word you want to use. And I saw this OpenAI come up with $1 million and gave 10 different groups $100,000 to come up with their proposal. And I was going through those proposals and I was amazed by some of the co-intelligence in there. So I sort of see this whole, how do we make AI more co-intelligent or more safe or responsible as a Trojan horse for co-intelligence or for the new culture, the meta mind, the shift that we need to make. And so that's one thing I wanted to bring up. I still want to dive more into those, and I'm going to go start talking to some of those people, just to understand even more about what they're doing. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I have a nephew graduating from Cal Poly, SLO, San Luis Obispo, in landscape architecture, and I went down to see all the senior capstone projects. And there were a number, like one example is a guy from Hawaii who said this big hurricane that hit Maui, how would we recover from that? And many were starting with get community input, and watch out for disaster capitalism. That was at the top. And so it was just exciting to see the thinking of these young students. And I'm not saying just the young people are going to save us. I think, as Tom says, we're all participating, and I want to continue to participate. But for whatever reason, lately, I've been feeling a little bit more hope about that. So that's my check-in.
Thank you, Marianne. Is there anything you wanted to say, Tom, in response? No. So maybe we'll shift now into the last half hour of the call. And what we have, just to say thank you so much for that discussion. Those points, by the way, it was really, really rich. So yeah, we are now going to shift into, I think, the theme, this question that Bob raised, time to make this real. How do we do that? So just to start off with, I can talk about what we're trying to do at the Co-Intelligence Institute. So there's I guess for the past 2-3 years, we have a new board that is trying to bring about some new projects. One of our, over our discussions, we felt that one of the important things that we wanted to do is, as best as possible, is to make wise democracy grow in the world. And to, bring the wise democracy pattern language to life as much as we possibly can. So we have a sort of series of projects that we're looking to implement, but it's just our small offering, that the possibilities out there of bringing more co-intelligence into the world, I think, are endless. So I will just put in the chat here a link to some of the projects that we have on the horizon that we'd like to do to implement, depending on capacity and resources that we get. They include our monthly calls, real-world co-intelligence calls, where we learn from various practitioners, people who are actually doing things that we consider co-intelligent in the world and highlighting those. We're also trying to weave key partnerships and collaborations with people working in the fields of democracy already, and deliberative democracy, collective sense-making. There's a project for a co-intelligence card deck and website. I was talking with George the other day about maybe the need to sort of gamify some of these things to how do we actually embody co-intelligence and actually give people an experience of it. And there's also a project about engaging with the meta crisis and finding meaningful orientation and agency in these uncertain times, and helping people through that as well, through, you know, potentially having conversations that look at aspects like trauma, like we've been talking about. And then there's the general sort of wise democracy R&D, which we jokingly a lot of the time called Tom's Skunk Works, which is basically advancing innovations and exploring what collaborative governance might look like. So those are some of the broad themes that we are working on, but we'd really love to open this call out to this exploration out to everybody. And yeah, how do we make this real? How do we embed these ideas so that they become increasingly integrated into our culture at large? And so what we thought we'd do is a little experiment that would, in a relatively quick period of time, find out where there's resonance and rough consensus. We've set up a little Polis survey, a little tool that we are going to invite you to, on this call, go into. And we think maybe, I'm going to put it here in the chat. There's the link to the Polis. Some of you have already started voting on this already. I'll do a screen share in a minute. But the idea is that there are ideas and there is a voting as well that takes place on other people's ideas. So what we thought would be good maybe is if people could spend a little time, maybe 5 minutes, thinking about some ideas that they have. How do we embed these ideas? And if this book, this co-intelligence book, were to be a catalyst for something significant, what would we have done to cause this to happen? I think this is a kind of a backcasting question. Like, so if we're in the future and something significant were to have happened due to this book, what would we have done to cause this to happen? So I'll put that question in the chat, but you'll find it also on the link that I'm posting. So I'll very briefly just go into to share the screen with you so you see what the poll list looks like, and then I'll give a little time for you to vote, or if you don't fancy that, then you can have a bathroom break or make yourself a cup. This is what it looks like. You get a series of propositions of ideas that others have come up with. You click on I agree, disagree, or if you're not sure, simply press pass. There's a whole bunch that are already in there. There's quite a lot of suggestions that have been made already. And you can share your own perspective. You know, you can we can start off by putting in ideas, or you can even start off by voting. It doesn't really matter. You might want to get a sense of what other ideas are out there already. But the idea is to vote on other ideas and to share your perspectives. And then afterwards, we'll stop and we'll have a look at the results. Any
quick question?
Yeah, Charlie.
So I've used Polis in the past, but not a whole lot. And a couple of hours ago, I went through and I voted and I added a handful of my own. And now I want to see the new ones. Is there a way that it's going to appear, or do I go? I mean, yeah, I'm a little confused.
If you're on the same device that you were using, if you've gone through them all right now, there probably aren't many. There may be 0 remaining. But as people enter new ones, they should actually appear. If they don't, try refreshing your page. They should come up. remember your, the cookies, the settings, and it will enter the
It
new.
should do. I'm not sure it is, but okay.
I don't think it's entered new
Yeah.
ones yet. So when that happens, they should appear. If not, just give me a shout.
All right.
A note from Natalia. She says, is this going to be available after this meeting for those who can't do it now?
Yeah, it will continue to be available. We'll keep it running. This is an experiment. We're not too sure how it's gonna. We don't have so much time. So if you could spend a little time on that, and then we'll look at the results and then discuss as a group who has energy for what do we want to do, what looks good for CII to do, things like that. So anyway, we'll leave it over to you.
Shot.
Yeah.
How long do they have before call back?
So let's say, well, we don't have so much time. So let's say, I'm going to be very precise here. And I'm going to say, come back at 17 minutes past. It's my precision facilitation now is going to have to kick into gear, make sure we get everything done. So 17 minutes past.
Okay. Charles, again, so is it useful for me to go through and agree or disagree on the ones that I did so I can find the new ones, or I can just stay out now?
You may be on a newer device. Did you vote on a different device previously?
It's the same device.
Really?
Same browser. Yeah.
If something has shown up, vote on it now.
Yeah, just go ahead and vote. I don't think it's gonna
All right.
Too much.
I found a way to see some old statements, but I can't vote on them.
You can't vote them. Oh, if are you at the bottom of the page?
Yep.
So if you scroll back up,
yeah,
and all of the comments are anonymous. So it will say anonymous wrote. Can you see that?
Yes, that still says the same original one it said.
If you click on agree, disagree, or pass, does anything happen, or is it?
Okay. I see. Oh, I can only see one at a time. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Got it. Thank you.
And if you have a great idea that you want us to vote on, then I would suggest that put that in before reading all that stuff that is already there, because we may run out of time.
I think you're right. I just realized that it's probably more important to prioritize your ideas, because then other people can vote on them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good thinking, George. Thank you.
Andy, could you share on your screen what to do? Because I'm new to this and I'm not following it. Can you put up on the screen and then guide us through?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so here we have the question that we're answering. If this book were to be a catalyst for something significant, what would we have done to cause this to happen? And here, one suggestion is create an initiative that brings together key figures globally who are advocating for a future guided by collective wisdom. And for that question, you can think, what do I feel about? I'm not sure, maybe. If you want to say pass, you click there. If you agree, you click there. So let's say I'm going to pass here. I'm not going to do too many of this because it's going to skew the results. But so I've clicked on that, and then a new idea comes up that somebody else has entered. And you do the same. You agree, you disagree, or you pass. And an important thing, though, is to actually, if you have any ideas or you want to enter something into the system that others will vote in, you share your perspective here. You type your response. And then when you've finished that, you click submit. And that will automatically be entered for others to vote on.
And in the background, there's an algorithm that is sorting us all into different camps, different belief groups, and noting where there's correspondence between them and where there's difference between them in various ways, which Andy will go over at the end. But this is happening in real time as we all do our ideation and voting.
Did that help?
The note up in the corner of the statement where the voting space, there's a note of how many more Andy has to respond to. Each person, it will show a different number, but it'll say, how many of these have you not responded to yet?
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's possible. This is for the future, obviously, but what I would have preferred is a rating scale, because I agree with a lot of them, but I don't agree with them equally. So there's a weighting system.
They're exploring how to do that, the people who put this together.
That's great. That's great. Iterative work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll see in a minute. When I show you the results, you'll get a sense of that there is a kind of a collective rating that's going on, and you'll see how that works in a minute when I show you. There's a kind of automatically generated report, and I'll show you that when we finish this little session.
No, I really like the idea of it, so thanks.
Welcome.
And the people who created it said this is not for making decisions. This is for it's giving you a landscape of perspectives, and then you should talk about it.
It's a great idea.
What to do about the agreements, what to do about the disagreements.
I'm looking at the report as people vote. I'll show you in a minute, but I can tell you that you've collectively already cast over 500 votes. So we're accumulating some collective knowledge here.
Probably very few disagreement.
I'm sorry, George?
Probably very few disagreements.
Quite, yeah. I think there's a lot of, well, there's definitely a spread here, I can see.
And I specifically put in a couple of things to evoke disagreement, like we should do whatever AI tells us to, or should do whatever Tom tells us to.
Interesting.
Struggling with the 140 character limit. I understand that, heaven knows.
So it's now 17 minutes past the hour. If you could finish whatever you're doing, whether you're voting or submitting a statement, we'll keep it up afterwards. Okay, so I'm going to do screen share. Everybody see that says report? I'm actually going to put this into the chat so everybody can have it as well. And here you can see, okay, I'm going to refresh it because we probably, okay. So far it says 20 people have voted, 17 people have been grouped. So Polis groups people into different sort of clusters of opinion. We've had nearly 600 votes cast, 45 statements were submitted. This here is what we call a bee swarm chart. And it's an interesting thing because in almost every Polis conversation, well, on the left here, let me first explain that we have the statements that had more consensus. And on the right here, we have the more divisive statements. And it's a very interesting phenomenon that nearly every Polis conversation after a sufficient time of voting have this kind of representation. Even if you have people with very different value systems, spread over a whole community or geography, it tends to end up with this kind of shape. There are more things that people tend to agree on than they disagree, which is interesting. So anyway, we can use this bee swarm chart here to see what other things we have the highest degree of consensus. And this is consensus across the different opinion clusters that appeared. So here on the left-hand side, we have, I don't know if you can see this, but it says, help journalists and media specifically to integrate co-intelligence principles and practices for collective wise sense-making. Promote individual practices like skillful conversation, systems thinking, bridging differences that can cumulatively seed cultural shift. And here you have, if you look at these three, there's 4 columns here where you see overall 92% of us agreed on that. And then there were 3 clusters, A, B, and C. A had 11 people in it, B had 5 in it, C had 1 in it. And it shows the different proportions there. Now, I'm just going to do a very, whistle-stop tour of this. It's going to be very quick because we don't have so much time. But anyway, this looks at the majority statements here. So all of these had 92. These are our top statements, the things that came out here. Yeah. Articulating a positive vision of a compassionate wisdom society that resonates emotionally and ethically across diverse groups. Prototyping new governance models. I'm going to let you read these because it's, let me see if I
can't read them on the screen. It's very small.
There we go. Is that better?
Yep.
So these are our majority statements. You've got the link, you can come back to these. This shows us how many people have read the book. Few of us have read the entire book. Nearly half of us have read some of the book, and about a third of us haven't read any of the book yet. And then these are the different groupings, clusters. The statements that make Group C unique are these statements, that they tended to agree on these statements, it seems. Oh, no, sorry, Group A, 11 participants, and they all had very high agreement on these statements here. Group B of 5 participants, and it picked out one particular statement that Group B had a strong resonance with, people sharing ways they have used this book in their work or lives. And Group C, it identified as one person that disagreed with a lot of things, but agreed with a coordinated campaign of supporters to publicize the book. So anyway, there's a lot here to browse through, but I wonder if we look at the majority statements, maybe that's a good place to start there. I don't know, or the consensus statements. The question is, in the remaining time that we have, what do we want to do? Is there anything here that people felt like they have energy to say, oh yeah, this is something I feel needs to happen, or that CII needs to take this on?
Or that person speaking would love to play a part in.
Right. Let me put these into the chat. But I guess it doesn't have to be. There can be other things that showed up.
Yeah.
It's not easy because I guess we're all in data analysis mode right now. And we're having to do this live.
It can, well, it's just a funny way. We could say, as you look through them, do you remember any that spoke to you personally? It's like, wow, this is well stated. This is something I really wish something could happen with. Just take it from an individual perspective instead of the collective perspective. We'd of course love to get people involved, but this doesn't have to have anybody involved at the end of it. Just read my book.
And
well, I have to admit that I took the liberty to invite into our conversation Claude AI and ask it the same questions that Andy asked from all of us. And the first three top agreed statements are given by the AI. And it's interesting that most of us agreed with it. I was surprised by the wisdom that one can read in it, in spite that it came from an algorithm. But anyway, to answer Tom's questions about what is that I would be excited to be engaged in, well, I'm already conducting research that hopefully will become a collaborative research, maybe between the Co-Intelligence Institute and my research center, Future Thought, because articulating a positive vision of a compassionate society, a compassionate wisdom society that resonates emotionally and ethically across diverse groups, I feel that that's really very important. So that's part of my life work, and I will be happy to share with anybody how far I got. But more importantly, what is important is not how far I got, but how far we can further this inquiry together.
Further and further and further.
Fantastic, George. Thank you so much. Yes, we will be following up with you on those points for sure. Thank you. Sita, I saw we're running out of time here, but it'd be wonderful. I think you wanted to say something, Sita, is that right?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think these kinds of statements in a way they're very easy to arrive at, because I mean, I think that process is fascinating, and it's amazing what it yields, and it's interesting that it's similar to what the AI said, but it feels like it's in the how of those things that the real work is, and what my curiosity is in the actual the doing of those things. And I'm also thinking of, like, for example, the language of systems thinking, which, you know, is not a Western creation, and has been around for a long time, both in that language and also beyond that language. And yet now I'm like all of a sudden seeing it pop up again everywhere. You know, these sort of times where you have these buzzwords where, like, oh, everyone thinks that system thinking is the thing to do now. So great, let's all do that. But without actually really doing systems thinking. It's like a pretend version that's whatever's convenient, whatever systems are convenient to look at within the frame of something that is continually something that I'm seeing. And I'm really curious, like, one is the language thing, getting people really comfortable with this language and the actual ideas that underpin it. But then also, like, what does it really look like in practice? That, and I think a lot of the co-intelligence calls have been great in uplifting practices. And I would just be a big fan of more of that, because I feel like the more things you can point to and say, there is an example and here's an example, it starts to become maybe more clear at the level of the collective what it is we're actually talking about.
Thank you, Sita. I think it would be great maybe to have a follow-up to this session and to go deeper into the hows and to explore what's come out of this. I'm going to hand over to you, Tom, to finish off in a minute, because we have literally 2 minutes before the official end, and then we have a chance for people to have a relaxed hangout if they want to. So, calls to action, what can we do? You can please do come to further co-intelligence events. We'll be sharing details of those with everybody who's attended. And if you haven't so far, you can purchase the book. Please do. If you do, please write a review. That is super helpful for Tom and for how it appears on Amazon. Subscribe to Tom's newsletter. Subscribe to the CII newsletter. I put that all in the chat. And yeah, please stay connected. We've got, like, if I want to make sure that people can slow, you've got your hand up. We've got like 1 minute left, and I know that Tom has a small short poem that he would like to read to close the event. So
it's just this. Think about who we should get to interview Tom, and tell us who we should get to interview him. Okay, go ahead.
Fantastic. Over to you, Tom.
This is the final page in the book, and it's called the Pop Haiku Koan. I want my bubble to fill the whole universe. I blow and blow. Pop. That's the end.
Thank you so much. So, yeah.
I'm hanging out, and anybody who wants to leave can leave.
People are free to go if they want to. If you want to say anything before you leave, also that would be great. But yeah, that's the official end. And we're going to hang out for a little bit more with Tom and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy and Tom and everyone else. It's great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Hi, Kevin. Kevin's the invisible support behind so many things.
Congratulations, Tom.
Thanks.
And Andy, thanks for my first poll list. That was great.
Oh, really? Good.